Hey, it's Netta, and I'm so excited to tell you that I've made a brand new quiz just for you called the Cravings Quiz. It's a quick 10-question quiz that I designed to get you thinking more deeply about your cravings, because the first step to feeling more in control around food, especially sugar, is to be aware of how cravings affect you. And whereas most quizzes give you generic feedback, I'm offering to give you specific, personalized feedback and practical tips to help you turn theory into action. So go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to do the quiz today and to take the first step so that you can get rid of cravings. Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman, and in this week's episode, I'm talking with Colleen, whose health and energy levels and whole life was transformed when she cut out gluten and vastly reduced sugar. We'll get to our chat in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. All right, so here's my chat with Colleen. So I'm here today with Colleen. Colleen, can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and what you ate when you were a child?
Yeah. So I grew up in the US. I'm from the Chicago area originally. So I had a lot of home cooked meals, but there was also a high amount of rewarding foods, pre-packaged, the Kraft macaroni and cheese, McDonald's for treats. Ice cream, we would go to DQ. That was like the summer thing, is getting ice cream. So the home cooked meals were really mixed in with a ton of packaged foods. You'd have sporting events and they would rotate bringing food to the sporting events, and it was like fruit roll-ups and Capri Suns and stuff like that after a game. So it was your kind of like stereotypical American diet growing up. Yeah.
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 And was that like all through your childhood and into adulthood?
It was. I mean, I did have a really good base just from the home cooked meals, which was great.
Yeah.
Um, and I sort of say like we didn't know what we didn't know at the time. We didn't know how damaging some of these foods were and the impact that they had on our brain, on our education, on our health in general, hormones, all of these different things. Um, so it really did carry very much into, as I went to college, and the way that I then fed myself in college was a lot of fast food and quick food and prepackaged foods. And that carried into, moving in with my husband, after we got married, and just what that was like after grad school and all of that until we made the massive diet shift. in my 20s that really sort of changed my life. So
Can you
it
tell
was,
us a bit
it,
more?
yeah, it carried on all the way until then. Yeah, so well, I'm sure it started way before my 20s, but in my 20s, I could barely get through the day. I mean, I was sleeping, I was going to work, so I was working full time, coming home, crashing in bed on the couch, kind of wherever I could fall. And, my sweet husband would do the dinner, the dishes, all the things, kind of wake me up, would watch a little bit of TV, eat, and I'd fall back asleep, wake up just wrecked as if I hadn't slept at all, repeat the whole thing. And through all of that, a lot, just I lived almost every day in pain, joint pain, migraines, GI discomfort, eczema. I mean, it was like check, 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 check of just different things going on. And I truly saw probably every specialist you could imagine to get a very expensive, clean bill of health saying, well, we can't find anything, so you must be healthy.
Uh-huh.
And it took me shifting my diet and really saying, okay, we're going to try something new. And within 2 weeks, the pile of medications that I was on, I was able to come off most of those. And it was like seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. It really was, where I was like, oh, I can stay up after work and actually have a conversation with my husband, or I can spend time with friends a little bit more than really pushing through. In those moments where I would push through, I mean, I would crash for days. And so it was very challenging, especially in my 20s, when it's sort of this, you're supposed to go out and live your life. Um, and I couldn't, I really couldn't. And I used humor a lot, like, oh, maybe it's a brain tumor. Who knows? We'll see what the neurologist says. But it was that shift in my diet that really it changed the game for me, and it made me see things in a different light that I had never looked at before.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. What was it that you changed in your diet?
A lot of things. The very first one was gluten, though. I actually took gluten out, and I fought it when the I had somebody that was going through a nutrition program, the same one that I ended up going through, and said, this sounds like you, this gluten intolerance, celiac, this sounds like what you have. And I said, I don't know what gluten is, and it sounds like a really dumb word. So I don't think I need to do anything with that, and fought it and fought it. And finally, I did a little bit more research and said, okay, maybe there is something here. And I was living on pretty much any gluten product you could think of. That was my diet. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it was something gluten. And so it was a huge adjustment. I mean, I had to change every meal, every snack, everything. Pretty much had gluten in it. And that one change for me was the spark plug that really just like lit everything else up, where I was able to see, okay, well, I actually wasn't really eating real food. I was eating processed food, and how damaging it was. And I had been diagnosed with ADHD in fourth grade. I stopped taking medication for that about 2 weeks after I changed my diet. Migraines went away. GI discomfort took about 6 weeks to go away. And the energy piece, that was huge. I mean, it was truly, I got my life back in that 2 to 4 week range of cutting
Amazing. That's
things
so
out.
fast. So
So
fast.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And did you cut all gluten all at once?
I did. And
Wow.
then I said, well, is it really gluten? And then I cheated and went back. And I did that for about a year, actually. And so I think, it's something that I see so often with clients, is that like, well, it's not perfect piece, right? And I struggled for a year. I kept saying, well, maybe it's not that. And to the point where even my family and friends were like, I really wouldn't do that. And it became this thing of, is it worth it? Now we know how sick I'm going to be. And is this thing really worth these 5 minutes that you're eating this food, or whatever it was? And after about a year of fighting that battle with myself, I
Yep.
said, okay, I think we really need to commit to this. And it's been, uh, gosh, over 10 years at this point. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
And let's face it, I'm pretty sure you didn't wake up every morning and say, hey, you know what? I really want to cut gluten.
No.
So, what did you want to change? What you were eating or your symptoms or something else?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't my food I wanted to change because I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. You know, I was used to the pastas and the breads and all of the things that I grew up with, right? And it was truly the day-to-day feeling that I had. I mean, I was missing moments with friends and family, and I was not a nice human either. You know, I was in so much pain every single day. I was so exhausted that I was crabby, irritable, a lot of mood swings, because I just couldn't even really function. And um, it was it was that piece of I just don't want to be in pain anymore. I just don't want to miss these moments anymore. And so when I saw that shift in the diet change, oh my goodness, it was like I had spent all these years with these specialists and all these different medications and these terrifying diagnoses, that ended up not being the case where, okay, we think you have this. We're going to run months worth of tests to say it's not it. So there's a lot of fear in there of just wanting that piece to be gone that finally shifted. I mean, it was out, I think when they were saying you might have cancer, that's what we think this is
Oh,
now. And at that point I said, I pray that it is at this point because I'm so tired of not knowing. Um, I just wanted something, and I'm very thankful it wasn't cancer
yeah.
and that it was something as simple as a diet shift. But I mean, I wanted my life back. That's what I wanted.
Well, my question is, did no doctor ever ask you, what are you eating? Let's have a look at your diet and see if we
Not
can change
one,
something?
not one asked about my diet with all of the symptoms, not one.
Okay. I don't know what to say to
Wild.
that.
Isn't that, I mean, it just, when you really think about it, it's just absolutely wild.
Yeah, it's because it's so simple. And in the end, what you had to advocate for your own health. How did you figure out it was gluten?
Just by taking it out. That was really it. It was, suggested to me. I did the research, said, okay, well, very begrudgingly said, okay, we'll try it. And it was that trial, like, let's just take it out. Um, and then bringing that to my doctor and saying, okay, I actually, this is something I've taken out for 4 weeks and I haven't had a sinus infection, all of these things that I was repeatedly going to the doctor for, and feeling kind of like a little insane because I was there so frequently. And she said, "Oh, huh, yeah, I see. It's probably celiac. You're right." And that was sort of the end of it. We could do a blood test. We could do the biopsy, but at that point, I had been off gluten for so long. She said, "You'd actually have to start eating gluten again to do these tests." And I said, "No, thank you."
Yeah, I bet you did. Yeah, so would I. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So nothing about gluten or celiac disease came up in all those dozens of tests. And once you figured out that it was gluten, what exactly did you cut out of your diet?
Yeah, so I cut out the breads, the pastas, and at the time we didn't have a ton of swaps. And so it was really getting back to very nutrient dense, real foods. So I went, and the kicker was I was also a vegetarian at the time. And so when I pulled out gluten, which was, you know, the bulk of what I was eating, I didn't really have much left. So initially it was a lot of fruits and veggies. And as I continued to heal, I actually started getting cravings for meat, and very slowly um, introduced meat back into my diet. And that was really a huge shift as well in terms of just that energy piece, because I finally, even though I felt the energy start to come back with the removal of gluten, it was adding in that protein piece that really was the jump start for everything else. But it was taking out the pastas, the breads, you know um, just the little things that you tend to snack on when you don't really think about it, the candy, the drive through, You know, things that I would have never even thought of, like soy sauce, were part of there. Um, and so it was really pulling all of those out and then figuring out what are some other options. I had never even heard of quinoa when I was doing this. So it was like exploring all new foods. Um, and it it was, fun. Some of the things we tried were awful. But it's come a long way. I mean, there's a lot more gluten-free options now, but that was the big ones, was like those processed, like crackers, another one that I can think of that were a big staple in my diet.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very often sort of snuck into other prepared foods that you wouldn't think had gluten in them, but they do.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of sauces. It was really interesting. I learned so much because there were so many things where flour was mixed in to thicken things. And then it was even what I didn't realize, and this took me, several months after being gluten-free within my diet, is so many products, makeup and hair products and different things like that contained gluten. And so there were times where I was getting these reactions and I could not figure it out. And then kind of went back down the rabbit hole and realized that there's a ton of products that contain gluten. And so I was washing my hair with these products and putting them on my face, and then my skin's breaking out. I had eczema on my eyelids. It was just all kinds of things. And so then making those swaps as well. So, um, and even things like salad dressing, you don't really think of these if you don't know. And
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of those hidden pieces as well. So,
Yeah. And I would argue that the same goes for hidden sugars, where you wouldn't think that, like in savory products, you'd have hidden sugars, but there they are.
yeah, when I was in school, I remember there was this statement in a book we read that said, like, what is unhealthier, the Big Mac or this salad? And it was the salad that had more calories, more sugar because of the dressing. And we don't think of that, of all of the hidden sugars. We often look at, like, what's the fats, and carbs get demonized and things like that. But yeah, it's things like salad dressings that or similar,
Yeah.
condiments and places you wouldn't even think, right?
I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews, and when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar. I know it's mind-blowing, absolutely. So I imagine if you cut gluten and the processed packaged products that contain gluten, because you're not exactly eating handfuls of flour on its own, right? It's got
Right.
to come wrapped up in some other ingredients. I imagine that as you cut gluten, by association, you also cut down on sugar a lot.
Oh yes. I didn't realize until I cut all of it out how much processed food and sugar foods I was eating. I worked in a hospital at the time, ironically, and there was always some sort of food that was dropped off, donuts, candy, and it was something that you just constantly nibble at. Um, and that was something too. I didn't realize gluten was added into a lot of our candy. And so that was an area where it was like, that's gonna cause a reaction for me. I'm not gonna eat that. And that removed a whole portion of what I was eating as well. Fast food, there's so much sugar added into meals and fast food for the US, at least. And that, it really took all of that out. So it forced me to eat real foods, which we should be doing, but we're not. It did. It really forced me to pull back and eat. So it did. It took out tons of sugar, the gluten, all the other chemicals that come with that too.
Yeah, yes. And one of the things that you got back for your health is your energy, right?
Mhm.
So, how does that look like for you in everyday life, having this energy?
Oh, so different. I don't know how I could have become a parent if things had stayed the same because I was truly sleeping 12 plus hours a day, more on the weekends. Um, and those times where I did stay out with friends or, do the vacation, it was a massive crash afterwards. So it really does feel incredibly different. And my husband and I joke now where we just think like, gosh, do you remember back when I just struggled through the day and um, it was a constant push. And now I can get up and get my kids ready, get myself ready, work and support clients, do the after school mom thing, spend time with my husband, um, you know, have nights where we're out a little bit, later and still wake up the next day and be able to function like a normal person, like we should be able to. And that, was not something that I could do before. So it has and not just, it's not just the day to day, it's the collective of not having to think ahead either of, okay, this is what, we're going to go on a date out at a restaurant. So we're going to be out past 10. I don't have to think of what do I have to cancel the next day or what am I going to miss the next day. I can just go and do those things and wake up and have a normal day the next day to do whatever I please. And working out, I mean, I couldn't work out at the time. I was so exhausted. Um, and so now I have a whole workout routine that I do weekly and it's great. I mean, and it just, I'm not drained at the end of that workout either to where I can't keep going it through my day. So it's,
Amazing.
yeah,
Yeah, it's life changing.
life changing.
Absolutely. And who'd have thought? Because we get told that sugar gives you energy, and yet
Mhm.
here you are with hardly any sugar in your diet, not completely sugar-free, that's fine,
Yeah.
but a lot less, and yet lots more energy. How can that
Yeah.
happen?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's so many diet myths out there, and like I think that's a big piece is we hear of these trendy diets, right? Where eat a ton of meat, eat all fats, cut out carbs, eat low fat, cut out all sugars completely, eat a ton of sugar, whatever it is. There's always this trend of something, and it's really finding A, what are real foods, and are you eating them? And B, what works for you. And then the last, and I think the most important part is really making it doable and not stressing about it because we can overanalyze every single aspect of our life, especially when we look at like food trackers. I track my food occasionally, but it's the information piece. Okay, where am I at? What does this look like? Not the obsessive side where we're looking at perfection and we're trying to be perfect. And when we're not perfect, it feels like a failure and we're off on a binge or we're, off the diet. Um, it is a lifestyle. And, I still have sugar every now and then. I have a piece of chocolate here and there. But it's not the main piece of my diet.
Yeah. And you're not stressing about the fact that you had a piece of chocolate, is that right?
Right. Yeah. It's, we make a choice to choose the foods that we're eating and also understand the balance of what a day, a week looks like. If we're looking at 80% of the time, we're eating a really good quality diet that's fueling us to give us that energy to support the functions of our body. And then 20% of the time, we have the snack, we have the fancy coffee or the dessert or whatever it is. It's not going to break the bank.
Yeah. Yeah. And that works really well for you. It wouldn't work for me, but it works well for you, which is the whole point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the beauty in it is there's not one diet that's perfect for everyone. It's
Yeah.
something that you find what works for you. And I've had people say, oh, I have to keep this out. For me, it's gluten. I have to keep gluten out. For other people, it's sugar, or for other people, they really don't respond well to other things, dairy, whatever that is.
Yeah,
But it's understanding how can we support our bodies, fuel our bodies, um, so that we have the energy to go through the day for our bodies to function the way that they're meant to function, and not have the disease, the dysfunction that we see so prevalent now.
totally. Totally. Yes. And you know what you're saying about perfectionism. I mean, I kind of blame the diet culture for making us believe that, we have to do it right,
Mhm.
whatever it is, whatever rule we're following, or bunch of rules. And it's like, can we please just like enjoy our food?
Right. Oh gosh, and I mean, that is so true because we don't. And I see so many people rushing through their meals, eating in the car, standing at the counter. And we're not even enjoying it. We're eating stuff that's not giving us the energy that we need, that's not fueling us. We feel like garbage later, and we're not even enjoying it. And um it's yeah, if we really get back to this is something that fuels me using our five senses, just really enjoying that experience of eating. We do it 3 times a day, right? We should enjoy it.
Yeah.
um it really does change, and it's healthier. It supports your digestion more. When we're in that relaxed state, when we're enjoying what we're eating, we're actually digesting our food so much better. um so but it takes time. It's creating these habits to get us into these places where this feels normal versus the like rushed meal. And creating habits is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Absolutely. Yeah, creating habits. It's funny because we've got so many automatic habits, right? That we're like, well, it's not that hard to think of brushing your teeth, two, three times a day, or, but the newness of a new habit is what's hard. That changeover from what you're
Yeah.
used to something new. And I say this as a teacher as well, anything that you have to learn the first time it's just hard.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, I see a lot of perfectionism of, well, I didn't track a full day, so I'm failing you. Um, and the big thing, none of us stood up one day and just walked. None of us got on a bike the first time and took off. We had to learn these skills. We had to learn how to brush our teeth, how to hold a fork, and it's just no different than any other habit. Is we're not going to get it right out of the gate. If you're trying to make a change, I tell people stack it together with something else. If you're really trying um, to cut out coffee, well, okay, what are you going to put in its place so that you can help with that habit, or whatever that looks like. If you're
That's
trying to go to bed, what were you doing before? You're not just going to
absolutely.
skip that and get in bed and expect to fall asleep. We need something else in its place. And so um and yeah, habits can be really challenging. And I see this, when I work with clients, we're looking at like, what does your lifestyle look like? What's your diet look like? These foundational things like your sleep and your water intake and different things like that. We're not going to change every single one of those. Here's a plan, go for it. Good luck. It's what feels right for you. What do you feel like you need to focus on right now? And let's do that. And oh, you need to be drinking 40 more ounces of water than you're currently drinking. Okay, well, let's start with 10. Let's just do 10 this week and see how that goes. And then we'll do 10 more. It's just these, slow incremental steps that get you there that much faster than trying to overhaul everything all at once. It being very challenging, and then it feels like failure. And then we get into that perfectionistic side as well, where
Yeah.
it's
It's like a vicious cycle.
Mhm.
And it's almost like we have lost touch with ourselves and like with what I call personal power to decide what's right for us. It's like
Yeah.
we're looking out there, tell me what to eat, give me a food plan, tell me how to move, how often, how many. It's like we've sort of become children.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to get that question so often is, well, do you have a meal plan? And I do have that for clients as a starting point, but it's not something, no meal plan is going to carry you for the rest of your life, unless you're just going to eat the same four things over and over and over again. And that's not fun. It's learning, what does your body need? And that's going to be different than what somebody else's body needs. And, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's learning these skills versus having someone tell you, do this, do that, do this, do that.
Yeah.
Do we need that in the beginning? A little bit more hand holding and a little bit more guidance? Yeah, sure. But then, it's like you're riding a bike, your parents got to let go at some point, and the same thing, like this is something that you can learn and do on your own. And it is absolutely possible. And is it challenging in the beginning? Yeah, but it's so rewarding. So rewarding.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's great that you help clients, with that. Can you tell us a bit more about what it is that you help them with?
Yeah. So my jam is working with moms who are just burnt out or exhausted, um, you know, maybe a little bit irritable, snapping at their family, things like that. But it's just a struggle. It's a struggle to get through the day, and I see this a lot with like mom culture of it's, time for wine or whatever it is, because we're just getting through the day and we're not actually enjoying this stage of life. We're not exactly energized enough to really want to even participate in it. It's just check boxes and going through the motions. And so I work with women mostly in 30s and 40s who are struggling with exhaustion. They're just in that burnt out state, and provide support. What needs to shift in diet, what needs to shift in lifestyle. I bring in functional lab testing, so we can get really clear answers as to what is actually going on inside instead of just throwing a whole bunch of guesses. Or, let's try this. Okay, well, let's try this. We're getting really targeted answers. We can target that support and make it very crystal clear. Um, and then we move through those habits one by one and what needs to shift one by one.
Yeah, sounds very similar to what I do as well. And it's sort of finding what works for you rather than what someone says works for you.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many times. And I tell clients all the time, I'm going to create this plan of what our time together is going to look like. But if this doesn't work for you, then we need to come up with a new plan, because I'm making recommendations based on what I see, but it actually has to fit into your life. And maybe that means that we're, not bringing in any supplementation initially. Maybe that means that we're bringing in, you know, one or two things and then we're layering those in a little bit later. um, Whatever that looks like for that person, it's very individualized to get that person to where they need to be the way that they need to get there.
Totally. Yeah, that's wonderful. If someone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, a couple different ways. You can find me on Instagram, and that's a really, I get, good messages through there, just asking for information, stuff like that. And that my Instagram is Colleen underscore mindfully nourished. And then my website is another great place. There's some good information in there, more info about me, my backstory, things like that. But you can also request information and request a consultation. And that is mindfully-nourished.com. And so there's, some freebies on there as well. I have a couple free guides, and then there's links for a free clarity call just to kind of talk through health concerns, goals, things like that. I always tell people, if I'm not a good fit for you, I'm going to let you know, and I'm going to find you someone that is a good fit. But that's the thing, when we're working together, we have to connect and we have to have a good working relationship. And if I'm not that person for you, let's find someone who is.
Totally. Wonderful. Thank you, Colleen, for talking with us.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
What an inspiring chat with Colleen, who's a perfect example of someone who didn't just sit around passively waiting for someone else, doctor or otherwise, to tell her what was wrong. She took her own health into her own hands, which doesn't mean rejecting medical input, but it means asking the right questions and being open to new possibilities. And one of those possibilities for Colleen was cutting gluten, which actually helped me too. And the other possibility was cutting sugar. And cutting down or cutting out sugar is a positive step for pretty much everybody. But cutting down or cutting out sugar is much easier said than done. And in my experience, the most difficult step is the first step. And that's why I'm inviting you to take the cravings quiz. It's a 10-question quiz that I created especially to get you thinking a little deeper about your cravings. And whereas most quizzes give you generic feedback about your score, I'm offering you more specific feedback and practical tips to help you put theory into practice and take that first step to get rid of your cravings. So go to aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button, Do the Cravings Quiz. That's aftersugarclub.com and click on the big green button to start getting rid of cravings today. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.